Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignon.
bringing you this week's Living Ascension. So we figured, as last week we started talking about how we weigh ourselves down with all these connections of how we think we're supposed to be, how we think we're supposed to act with people because of what the expectations are around relationships as we define them and blah, 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 how that's actually really mind living, right? And changing things from, because we talk about wanting to find like-minded people. And it's like, well, no, really the bigger thing is connecting with like-hearted people. And then we talk about the whole living from the mind, living from the heart. And we really are still very sort of deficient in acknowledging and recognizing, which is the difference, right?
Right. Or even what it looks like.
Right. So that's what we figured is like, well, the next question is, well, what does that really look like in living? Right? Like in living day to day, because we can tell you here's the thing, we can tell you easily, well, not easily, more easily, how to tell what is heart mind centered, right?
Right.
Versus telling you, talking about how do we live heart centered. Now, the first thing we want to say is living heart centered does not mean that you need to be some sobbing, crying mess or like emotional upheaval all the time, right? Because that's what people think, right? When you say,
or unproductive sitting in meditation all the time.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing unproductive about that.
But it's simply a judgment of I sit and do nothing.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is people say, oh, well, and in our, good morning, Yasmin, in our society and culture, we talk about being emotional or being heart-centered as being feminine. Oh, there's the yawn. And I don't believe that's necessarily the truth. It's just a different energy, right? I mean, we can, oh my gosh, I can't think of the word. Categorize it that way. We can categorize it that way. But the reality is heart-centered is a lot more than, because here's the funny part. Emotions actually come mostly from the mind.
And judgment.
Which is ego. It's all ego-based, right?
Right.
So when we're crying about something because we're sad, most of the time it's, well, if it's because we're sad, it's most of the time it's from the ego, even if it's because we're happy. But see, sometimes then there's a difference. As we start living from the heart, I've noticed, here are things like this. Tears come because the body becomes like the container's not used to holding as much of something energetically, right?
Right.
So
it's the overflow.
Yes, this overflow of consciousness, right? Which can feel blissful, right? Which then you can think is a tears of joy, but it's simply this overflow of beingness that happens, right? That causes these tears.
Right.
I have found, as I've myself, as I focus more on living in this space of living from the heart, that we become less emotional.
Right. And I truly believe that is from a losing that the underlying thread and consistency of judgment is you're constantly weighing everything that comes into your energy, good or bad, good or bad, good or bad, good or bad. Do I keep this? Is this for my benefit? And why is this here? And it's that examining versus that unconditional acceptance and presence with it.
Right. Because I feel like really that heart-centered living is the more presence with it, right? So it can be meditating all day. It can be being in that state of consciousness and presence all the time without judgment.
Right.
Without saying this is wrong, or without saying this is how I have to be, or without saying this is wrong too. At the same time, it's just being. And when we get to that place, then it's like, okay, well, then it's easier when we stop the judging, right? And the judging has to do with all these things we hide from ourselves, like okay, I have to do this because it's what I'm supposed to do as a parent, or it's what I'm supposed to do as a spouse, or I'm doing this to make him happy, or I'm doing this to make her happy, or, he's not happy unless I do this, or she's not happy unless I do this. All that's mind thinking. All that is mind living. It's all ego, because underneath that are the intentions of things like, well, they'll love me if I make them happy, which nobody ever makes anybody else happy but themselves.
Right. Right.
Right there. And the thing is, happy is also an egoic emotion, right? It's like, it's
Absolutely.
another, comparative. So when the presence really comes, when you're really in the state of presence, and we call it bliss, right? We call it transcendental, you could call it all kinds of things, but it's simply the state of being that transcends the emotions as we define them from the ego.
Right. Right. It's that expansion of the consciousness to take in and live from more that place of observation and presence. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it other than a presence and authenticity, which I think that authenticity is a descriptor of that heart-based thinking, heart-based living, because it truly gets down to the why we're here, that authentic, in the moment, this is who I am, and this is a reflection of who I am.
Right. And it's not to, also the other point is, it's not to vilify or, make it the mind stuff less than, because that's part of the experience we want to have in duality and separation, right? It is, as I experienced, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago in a session with a client, it was opening, like, well, so we talk about the third eye all the time in vision work, right? And the third eye is up here in the mind. So what happens is we get the vision and then we translate it through our filters of judgment, right?
But it's like in the mind, out in the mouth, in the
right.
mind, out the mouth.
Exactly. And so a while ago, I got the insight of, like, there's the fourth eye, which is from the heart. And the fourth eye is the one that's really important to open up, because it is number one, it helps us connect at such an easier, more complete and authentic way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it also then the next step from opening that fourth eye is in the heart is connecting the third eye and the fourth eye, so that the third eye and fourth eye feed each other instead of the third eye just feeding the mind.
Right. And nicely meet in the middle for the mouth,
Yes.
for the communication.
Yes, for the communication of that presence in an accurate and present way. That's a word of the day, presence.
Right. Right.
So when we connected, it's like this. We are going to be comparative. That is part of this existence, right? It's a matter of being observant to our being comparative. It's a matter of being observant to. So I had a thing over the weekend where I had so much, this wacky, big, huge tsunami of emotion came up on Saturday. And it was fabulous, because I was like, okay, I'm going to ride this wave. And I'm going to, like, let it spit up everything. And I was like, and I think I wrote like literally 15 pages in my journal, because it was just like blah, 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 blah.
Well, you stayed in presence with it.
Yeah. And so
what is here for me in this moment?
Right. And then I cried, and I was like, and I was like, oh, I know that's all nonsensical. I know, like, blah, blah, blah. And then I went into this meditation, which calmed me. And then I did another different kind of meditation, which completely shifted me and completely got me to a place of seeing the whole thing and letting go. Right. And being like, oh, okay, now I have gratitude for that whole thing. And I see what it did. I see how it served. I see how blah, blah, blah. And it was just such an easy shift. And then all of a sudden it was like, Oh, I don't know. Like this morning, I hadn't journaled yesterday. Yesterday I was journaling. This morning I was journaling, and I'm like, wow, what a difference, like, 36 hours makes. Like I'm
Right.
a completely different, in a completely different place. But
Right.
there's no judgment at that. It's just, I'm so glad I rode that wave, because look at how fast it came. I let it play out, I let myself see, I invited it in without letting it stay for too long. And I said, okay, as we've talked about, is like, come on in and tell me what you have to show me. Like, what is
Right.
there, what
What
is
is
there you have for me?
right?
You know?
What
And
is
so I
here for
did
me
that.
in this moment? Right.
Yeah. So I did that. And I was present with it. And then I saw its purpose. I then forgave it. I forgave myself. I did all the forgiveness stuff that we have our whole course on forgiveness about.
Right.
And I let it go with gratitude, because it showed me so much in seeing it that way. And that was really powerful. And it's a challenge though, because guess what? We have so much of the stuff that we have repressed down, right?
Right.
And we get distracted, and it's interesting, like, we think about this, was it you I was talking to, or did I dream this? I don't even know. I can't tell anymore. But I had a conversation somewhere recently about relationships and how it's really time to rewrite the book. I've had it so many times recently, and it truly is time to rewrite the book on relationships, because we have developed this dependency on what relationships do for us,
Mhm.
right? And it's like, oh yeah, I want to be with this person because I'm happy with them all the time, or I feel important around them, or they are so dependent on me that I feel important. And see, all that's all ego and all thought, but we put it in the heart and we think, oh no, it's passion. Like, I'm passionate about this person. And it's like, because they make you feel good about who you are through whatever your interaction is with them, right? But when we come to, like I said, when we talk about relationships, when we come to a relationship from a different place, from that place of the presence, the non-judgment, and knowing that there's nothing that I'm depending on outside of myself, right? I'm just here.
It's the difference between coming from a place of lack versus coming from a place of fullness.
Right. And that's really a mind versus heart thing, because the mind is very trained to be in lack.
Right. Well, and we're bombarded with being consumers.
Mhm.
And it's all about, if there's not a lack there, leading you to believe that there is.
Mhm.
And we're taught as, babies, that when you experience something, someone needs to fulfill that for you.
Right.
Baby, you cry, you get fed if you're hungry, and what dirty diaper. And then that goes on into, the squeaky wheel gets the attention, and we just continually reinforce that and reinforce that. And, just from a practical perspective of this weekend, shifting my focus, I found so much. I intentionally spent more time outside, even though it's really hot. I did it early in the morning because it's still hot in the evening. But I could feel myself identifying with, like, the things that I find beautiful and calming, and I could see that as a reflection of me. And then I would see, something silly like a cricket dead in the pool, and it's like, I wanted to separate from that because I judged it.
Mhm.
And I wanted to separate from how parched everything looks from there's just not enough water when it's 105
Mhm.
for a lawn or for a bush or whatever. And I wanted to say, well, that's not part of me. And I could feel uh, a sadness creep in. And once I caught myself and said, actually, it's all me and it's all part of me. And then work through the forgiveness of how I've judged that and how I've separated that from me, and the pieces and parts of me that I'm not allowing of myself because of that judgment.
Mhm.
And the symphony just became so much more balanced within myself by allowing that. And, that the same goes with relationships.
Mhm.
Is there are pieces and parts that you want to judge and say, well, I like this, but I don't like this. And it's all there for a reason. Every speck of everything. And
Mhm.
it brings me back to that movie that we've talked about, I think the last 2 weeks, is everything all
Everything
everywhere
everywhere all at once.
all at once. And it's like, yes, that's it. That's it. In every moment.
Yes.
And that just,
Yes, it's funny because there was something we were watching over the weekend. I don't even remember what it was now. Probably was Friday. That's probably why it seems like it was so long ago. But I remember there was somebody made a comment of, you can't deny yourself the
right.
parts you judge. You can't deny yourself the parts you judge, because then you're never whole.
And that is so true.
And it was
That
so
is
funny
so
because
true.
my husband looks at me and he goes, "Look at that." And I'm like, right in a movie, right?
Right. Well, and I read something else that, and we've shared a poem back and forth about what people envision, you know, uh, a calm mind looks like, or inner peace looks like. And it's the same as peace is not all still water and quiet and serenity, and it's that in the middle of this.
Right.
And that's making that shift of judging this as something undesirable.
Right. Right. And that's the funny, that's like another one of those double-edged sword things that we are not used to looking at, right? So here's some examples, like, because this is a thing that goes on a lot, is we judge things as good or bad all the time based on like what kind of a situation somebody's in or whatever. And we talk about, oh, well, we pity somebody because of a situation they're in, or we feel bad for them, which is the same as pitying.
Right.
And you know, oh, well, blah blah blah. And if I get, well, here's the thing. If it's when we honor that we're each and every one of us like an embodiment of the divine. And if we took out the linearity of time, we're all everybody, right? Experiencing a different life,
Right.
embodied in all these different people, right? Again, back to everything everywhere all at once, right? So when you truly like get to that, there's nothing to pity. There's only to honor by saying, I am so honored to see and witness that your choice of the journey. And if I'm guided to be in interaction with that, that's great. And if not, that's okay too. Right. So it's not good or bad or bad. Yasmin says exactly. So it's like, it goes, and I've used this experience, example before, but somebody I had worked with, a while back, who had a lot of money, would talk to me about how guilty they felt about having a lot of money. And I'd be like, why do you feel guilty? Well, because there are people starving and I don't feel like I do enough. And I send, money, and I send this, and I do volunteer time. And I'm like, okay, but here's the thing. Those individuals have chosen, for whatever reason, to be without
that experience.
that experience.
Absolutely.
I said, also, we also judge based on certain standards that we think everybody else is required to have. Like, because we think other people don't have the same standards of living as we have, say, in the United States, that they're deficient.
Right.
And yet
I talked to my daughter about that. She had such a paralyzing effect from seeing homeless. And I said, you have to realize that at some point they may have made that conscious choice or even unconscious choice because the life they were expected to lead was too much, that it was unpleasant for them. And that imposing, your beliefs on them is equally as difficult for you as imposing their lifestyle on you.
Right. And, they've done, like, so even when we look at like third world countries too, right?
Right.
Or whatever, they've done sociological studies, and people in simpler societies actually tend to have happier lives.
Right.
Go figure.
Right. Right.
They tend to be much happier with their community, with the people that are around them. And yes, okay, absolutely, there are deficiencies and standards, and that's a different discussion on a different day. Like, but then that's also a choice at some level, right?
Mhm.
That the soul brought in to have a certain set of lessons, even if they judge it as hard, right?
Right. Right.
And so there's always the choice to change it. There's always a choice to change the energy, to complete the lesson and to move on, because we can do that. People say, oh, I'm cursed. Well, guess who cursed you?
Right.
You did.
Having is evidence of wanting.
Right. You did. You can change it. So it's all of these kind of things. And so when we stop pitying and judging and saying, oh, or that person has a better life than me, because let me tell you also, people who have an infinite amount of wealth don't necessarily have a happier life either. There have been studies about that, right?
Right.
In fact, they sometimes are less happy than most people. So, it's how we, and then there are some who are just perfectly happy and have everything. So it's okay, right? All of it's okay. And some who have nothing and are completely happy with that. It's all okay. It's all perfect, right?
Right.
And so the living from the heart is truly that, is accepting that, is
Right.
saying, I honor your journey, because I know deep down you are the divine just as I am. And you're infinitely powerful in your creation. So therefore, you have created the exact reality that you've chosen.
Right.
Because there's no other choice. Like,
right.
you do it because you're a creator,
Well, and a good indicator of knowing when you're not coming from that place of that unconditional acceptance is when when a situation or a circumstance evokes an emotional response, whether it's fear, whether it's guilt, whether it's anger. That's again, you've popped from the heart back to the mind. And that's the perfect opportunity to say, okay, if I'm present with this that's in my mind, how can I then get back to the heart with the same circumstances?
Right.
And that gets really into the practical application of this. And it's almost I don't want to say a retraining, but it's just that remembering that this is how I shift this without judgment, without that self-harm that we tend to jump to.
Yeah. And so this is a big retraining again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm saying, is like keeping it open, instead of like, you're not denying the third eye, you're not denying the mind. It's this connection and letting the heart, the true heart of presence and consciousness, really be the leader, right? And saying, I recognize all of this. I see it.
Right.
And I honor it as it is, because it is perfect and it's beautiful, complex creation. That's what the mind loves. The mind loves complexity.
Right. Right. And it's almost like, I don't want to say a bait and a switch, but it's like, in exchange for turning over those emotions to the heart, I will feed you back more complexity.
Right. That you can go ahead and explore at your convenience, kind of thing.
Right.
But it's simpler in that complexity. It's simpler in that, the way it plays out. And because it's only the other part that's a challenging thing, and because we get so stuck in the mind, is things are only complex because we think they are, right? Just like things are only worth pitying because we think they are, right? Things are only worth honoring because we think they are, in terms of like, like this is better than this, or, we need to bow down to this, whatever this is, because this is, more important and this is less important. And it's like, nope, that's still judgment. That's mind. Right. So, and it's when we get to the place of just seeing the beauty and the complexity of everything.
Right. Right. And again, from that practical standpoint is practicing, because I used to get up and, the mind immediately kicks in and says, okay, what are we going to accomplish today? What's the to-do list? What's the things that I need to accomplish so I can feel productive today? And turning that emotion into what do I want to observe today? What do I want to experience today? And I feel like that turns it from being in the roller coaster cart that someone else is driving to being in the driver's seat and saying, what would I like to experience today? And from
Yes.
that perspective, my day really is completely different, even though I might accomplish exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
The mind comes from a completely different place.
Well,
And it's
right.
almost like the heart drives, and then the mind is the project manager that directs how to get it done.
Right. Right. And yeah, the key is then to recognize that also like letting go of control of it. Like,
Absolutely.
so it's this fine line again, how to manage it without controlling, right? How to, accept more in this nonlinear space, which we've been talking about, right? Nonlinear creation is, and yet still allowing, the mind. So like, we're really retraining the mind in many ways to say, okay, well, let's see, like, so yeah, my version of what you're saying is I've found myself, like, I lay in bed and I will visualize the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no, like, it's really, if any words come to my mind, it's more of what is there for today? What is there for me today? What is there for me today? And I've realized that recently, that that's changed not too long ago. And it wasn't even a conscious change. It just sort of shifted. And it's a much more pleasant way of getting up in the morning, because it's almost like, oh, it's almost like Christmas morning. Like, what is there for me today?
Right. What present shall I unwrap today?
Yes. In presence. So yeah, it's a completely, I mean, this is living ascension. This is all what it's about. This is a completely different existence, and it changes. What's funny is I've found, and I don't know about you, is so like the more I do this, because I realized not too long ago that this has been going on for me for a while, but every once in a while, like probably about once a week, I'll wake up at like 4:30, right? And the mind just kicks in, because it's almost like the ego is freaking out, going, wait, but you're forgetting about this and this and this and this. And then it feels like this anxious thing, like whole train of thought of, oh, but wait, but you're not like focusing on this and this and this. And like, I'll sit there and like watch that go on, right? For like sometimes a half hour, 4:30 in the morning.
Right.
And then it's like, I had that this morning, which was funny because I was feeling in such a great place. And then I was like, where is this coming from? And then I just sort of laid there and I let it play out. And it was almost like I was watching a little kid, like, have a little temper tantrum or whatever. And then I was like, are we done now? Can we go back to sleep? And I
Are we
did.
there yet?
Yeah. I mean, and I didn't say that with judgment. I just waited till like all of that chatter just like stopped. And sort of like
Wore itself out.
Like, yeah, wore itself out with, like, it was taking a breath. And then I was like, okay, is it time to go back to sleep now? And I did, and I slept great after that.
Right.
So it takes an adjustment, right? Because it's like the ego wants to control, the ego wants to manage and all that kind of stuff. And so when we let go and we're in this different place of presence, it's a long, unhabituation, right? Rehabituation. Because I feel like it's getting longer, like further and further apart. But then it's like I said, it's almost like something will just probably trigger the ego somewhere, and then it's like, and it's like, okay, Now you're done.
I think the key in that is providing that feedback to the brain / ego of, oh, here's some complexity to look at.
Yeah. Or, okay, so you think that's complexity, but here's the reality. And that's really what I did this morning, because it was like, after all the chattering stopped, I was like, all right, so here's another dose of creation, right? Here's another dose of presence.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, it was like everything really was quiet. And that was when I was like, okay, now I can go back to sleep, right?
Right. Well, and something just popped in my mind. We talked about last week about that, when we get to that place of presence and that lack of propulsion. And if we look at living this heart-led life, the propulsion is allowing oh wow, I hope I can remember all that just came flooding in, is allowing that that to permeate our life and that to be our lifestyle. So coming from that place in the heart, and that becomes the propulsion, is allowing that to lead versus the brain to kick in and determine priorities. It's the heart leading us in directions based on input from, like you said, the third and the fourth eye, and allowing us to come to that different place of, I don't know, I see it a pull to things versus a push to things.
Yes. Yeah, or a pull.
Like an attraction.
Pulling, like yeah, instead of like I'm seeing like a tether, right? Just like a floating, like just a different.
Right. Yeah.
And it makes it clear, and by the way, then it just makes it so much clearer. Then everything is just happening all at once, and it just
and the more you stay in that place, the more you identify when you veer out of your lane. I think of those things on the road that they put on the stripes and everything to tell you when you're veering out of your lane. And it's like, or the new cars that have
the cars, they all like they
jerk you back.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find that the more you practice and the more you become used to staying in that place of heart-centeredness, you'll be able to identify, oh, that doesn't feel good, or that doesn't feel congruent with where I am. And that's another way to identify.
That's really funny, because that whole analogy just comes to mind. This dream I had right before I woke up the last time this morning, which was all about that. And I was literally driving a car. Right. And it was a sports car. And it was so funny because I was like, why did I buy this car? In the dream, I'm like, why did I buy this car? It's so small, right? And then I was like, well, but then it's easy and it's, compact and blah, blah, blah. And like I was driving people back and forth, but it was like one person at a time because it was just this little sports car, right? But at one point I was in the car by myself, and it was like there was all this traffic around me and I had to get someplace and the exit was coming up, and I was guided to literally just turn around and the car would take care of it. And like I literally was like, okay, this is weird. Why am I doing this? Right? It was, and even in the dream, like, why am I doing this? But it was really funny because it's very much like what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh, that's what that dream meant. It was all about like just trusting it's all good, right? So no matter how hard I tried in the dream,
right,
I was still going, like, or how little I tried, I was still going in the same lane. I was still going in the same way. Until I finally was like, oh, well, this could be fun. And that's when I turned around and I was looking behind me and I was doing all this other stuff. And it's true, there's that presence. And it's like, oh, thank you for clarifying what that dream was about, because I feel like that's what it really was about.
Right.
And the funny part was, in the dream, I was complaining half the time, right? Going, why did I get this car? Blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, I was finally like, oh, wait, no, this is why. This is like perfect.
Right.
And that's what we do with life all the time. I'm complaining because I created this for myself. I'm complaining because this is too complex, or I'm complaining because, except I created it
Right. Right.
because I wanted it some way. Oh, no, 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 I didn't want this. Yes, I did. Right. So these are the conversations I have with myself too. Right. And then it's like, okay, so then let's be present with it. See what it's, like the thing to do really is just, let's be present with it. See what it's there to show me. And then if I'm so guided, I will change it because I can.
Right.
If not, I just write it out and know that it just is what it is. Which then allows us that whole, I can be present in the chaos. That's the living it differently.
Yes. Yes.
So on that, I would say that would be on the avenue of our clearing for today. Oh, my sleeve
Right.
keeps,
Yeah. Feel like I'm already out there.
yeah. So let's do. Well, I think last week we did about knowing how to do, like, let's do the, I allow myself to let that heart, the fourth eye lead. I allow myself to let that lead. And I allow the third eye and fourth eye to connect. And I allow my fourth eye to open. And I allow, I allow. I think I allow is the key word for this week. And
Right. And I allow the presence to evolve from that communication.
yes. And from that shift in management.
Oh,
Yes.
nice.
Yes, that feels good.
All right.
All right, everyone. So as we well know, everybody take a deep breath, make yourself comfortable. As we close your eyes, as we step out of separation, back into wholeness and oneness, and we hold ourselves at the vibration where that is our truth. That is from where we create, exist, and experience. All right. That was very freeing.
Yes.
Very freeing. Oh my
Felt
goodness.
very, oh gosh, self-perpetuating. And it reminded me of the spiral that we talk about, instead of cycling, spiraling, and it emanating from that fourth eye.
Nice.
That
I
felt
saw I saw something like, you know, I don't know, you see sometimes in, I don't know, game show or something. Not that I watch game shows, but where I'm like, I don't know where I've seen this, but this is what I saw. You know, like when somebody's like standing on a platform and they're like dropped down with like a big like wave of water kind of thing into a pool, you know. Yeah, sort of like a dunking booth or something, like a dunking booth. That's what I was seeing. Okay. But it was like, it was almost like it was the opposite, where the tank of water was on the top and it had all this weight, right? And so you're sort of suffocating in the water. And then so it's like the thing the chute opens up and it was just like this huge release, which felt like such freedom. And it was like, oh, now I can just float. You're like, now there's no like, you know, fight. And I was like, oh, that's nice.
right.
Um, and then
Yeah, the flow instead of the fight.
yes.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that felt nice. And then I floated out there. There were some other things I saw, but I don't remember already. They're already gone, but it felt good. Good place to start. It's a really big retraining for us. This is like probably the biggest in many of the things.
Oh, absolutely. And the impact is proportionate.
Right. So it's like, okay, well, that's our practice for this week.
Right.
Is, you know, look at everything and how you're managing every day, and look at everything you're thinking about, because that's the mind, and say, where is there for me to shift, you know, to a place of heart centered, present centered. If you don't like heart centered because it makes you think too much emotional or whatever, and that's like,
Right,
okay, well,
right.
let's just call it present centered, right?
Right,
Consciousness
right.
centered.
And now that we've brought the idea of the fourth eye, put the mind to find that.
Yes, and allow and to set yourself to allow it to open.
Right, right. Yes.
It was funny because I did that, like I was saying, with a client of mine and a couple weeks ago, and they were like, oh my God. Like I spoke to them on Friday again, and they were like, what we did changed everything. Like connection is so different and just on a different plane and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, I know. And yet it's so understated. And then I forget about it. And then it comes back around and it's like, oh, obviously this is a really important thing right now.
Yes.
It's important for us.
So.
You know, like when we say, a lot of times when we say heart-based, we're saying, oh, well, you know, do this and be this and whatever. That's still from the mind, right?
Right. Emotion based, but people want to make that the same thing.
Right.
Right.
But actually, it's important to remember the emotions come from the mind.
Right.
And the feeling, because the mind tries to define an emotion, where the heart is just being, right? And yes, we do have sadness and happiness and whatever, because that's what duality is all about, to create those really lack of things, right? Because that's really what all of our emotions are, right? So like happiness is lack of sadness, right? Sadness is lack of happiness, or like not happy, you know, it's like this whole like lack of
duality.
Yeah. So when we just get to this place of presence, it's just this and we call it bliss, because then we are unconcerned, because it's all inclusive.
Right.
And that's a challenging thing to explain with words when you have, you know, like to feel it.
Right.
So, but work on that, opening the fourth eye this week, you know, when you go into meditation, and come back and do this meditation over and over. And as this can help so many, make sure you pass it on to a friend or relative who you know could really benefit from this.
Right. And let us know your experience in the comments.
Yes, please.
We'd love to hear.
Yes. It's great hearing feedback and just
Right.
how different perceptions of the experience are going with everyone. Because it gives us more
Which
ideas on what we talk about. So
exactly. That's just what I was going to say, which could lead us to what we talk about next.
yes. Yeah. So on that, and yes, share us on social media, follow us, subscribe to our podcast on it's actually livingascension.podbean.com. And because we did finally change it. And follow our page, and we will see you next time.
That's
So
right.
thank you for joining us. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
signing off with this week's Living Ascension. Have a great one.